So we'll start here. The existence of the masters. The existence of perfect men in one of the most important of many new facts which theosophy puts before us. It follows logically from the other great theosophical teachings of karma and evolution by reincarnation. As we look around us, we see men obviously at all stages of their evolution, many far below ourselves in development, and others who, in one way or another, distinctly in advance of us. Since that is so, there may well be others who are very much further advanced indeed. If men are steadily growing better and better through the long series of successive lives, tending towards a definite goal, there should certainly be some who have already reached that goal. Some of us in the process of that development have already succeeded in unfolding some of those higher senses, which are latent in every man and will be the heritage of all in the future. So we're going to activate all our gifts once we get into the future. Children are already being born that way. They have all kinds of amazing abilities. And by means of those senses, we are enabled to see the ladder of evolution extending far above us as well as far below us. And we can also see that there are men standing upon every rung of that ladder. There is a considerable amount of direct testimony to the existence of these perfect men whom we call masters. But I think the first step which each one of us should take is to make certain that there must be such men, only as later steps will follow, that those with whom we have come into contact belong to that class. The historical records of every nation are full of doings of men of genius in all different departments of human activity. Men who in their special lines of work and ability have stood far above the rest. Indeed, so far that time, and probably more often than we know, their ideas or their ideals were utterly beyond the comprehension of people, so that not only the work that they may have done has been lost to mankind, but their very names even have not been preserved. It has been said that the history of every nation could be written in the biography of a few individuals, and it is always a few towering above the rest, who initiate the great forward step in art, music, literature, science, philosophy, philanthropy, statescraft, and religion. They stand high sometimes in love of God and their fellow man as great saints and philanthropists, sometimes in understanding of man and nature as great philosophers, sages, and scientists, sometimes in work for humanity as great liberators and reformers. Looking at these men and realizing how high they stand among humanity, how far they have gone in human evolution, it is not logical to say that we cannot see the bounds of human attainment, and that there may well have been, and even now may be, men further developed even than they, men great in spirituality as well as knowledge of artistic power, men complete as regards human perfection, men precisely such as the adepts or supermen whom some of us had the inestimable privilege to encounter. This galaxy of human geniuses that enriches the beauty, excuse me, the galaxy of human genius and the riches of the beauty and beautifies the pages of history is at the same time the glory and the hope of all mankind. For we know that these greater ones are the forerunners of the rest, and that they flash out as beacons, as veritable light bearers, to show us the path to which we must tread if we wish to reach the glory which shall presently be revealed. We have long accepted the doctrines of the evolution of the forms in which dwells the divine life. Here's a complementary and a far greater idea of the evolution of life itself, showing that every reason For the wondrous development of higher and higher forms is that the ever-swelling life needs them in order to express itself. Forms are born and die, forms grow, decay, and break, but the spirit grows on eternally, ensouling those forms and developing by means of experience gained in and through them. And as each form has served its turn and is outgrown, it is cast aside that another and a better form may take its place. And that's part of reincarnation, as we take on different things for that reason, is to grow and evolve. That's why we had to explore all the different cultures and beliefs for thousands of years, and we had to go through good, bad, right, wrong, wars, and every other thing. And now we're ready to move into the fifth dimension and throw off these old things that, like we have been doing for a long time now. We're going to discard really lots of things, and we're going to go into a new evolution, and it's coming really fast. And as each form has served its turn and is outgrown, it is cast aside that another and better form may take its place. Behind the evolving form, burdens, Burgeons, what, Burgeons? Burgeons, I don't know. Out ever the life eternal and life divine, the life of God permeates the whole of nature, which is but the many-colored cloak which he has donned. It is he who lives in the beauty of the flower, in the strength of the tree, in the swiftness and grace of the animals, as well in the hearts and souls of man. It is because his will is evolution that all life everywhere is pressing onward and upward. It is therefore that the existence of perfect man at the end of this long line of ever unfolding power and wisdom and love is the most natural thing in the world, even beyond them, beyond our sight and our comprehension. Searches a vista of still greater glory, some hint of that we may endeavor to give later, but it is useful to speak of it now. The logical consequence of all this is that there must be a perfected man, and they are not wanting signs of existence of such men of all ages who, instead of leaving the world entirely to pursue a life of their own in the divine and supreme kingdoms, so they go into these higher heavens and places. Hey, man. So they leave this world entirely to pursue the life of their own in divine and superhuman kingdoms, have remained in touch with humanity, and this is where we call them masters, gurus, and teachers. They to assist evolution in beauty and love and truth, to help, as it were, to cultivate the perfect man. Just as here and there we find a botanist who has special love for plants and glories in the production of a perfect orange or a perfect rose. And then it says, testimony of religions. The records of very great religions show the presence of such superhumans, so full of divine life, that again and again they have taken as the very respective of God himself. In every religion, especially at its founding, has such one appeared, in many cases more than one. The Hindus have their great avatars and divine incarnations, such as Sri Krishna, Sri Shankaracharya, I don't know, Shankaracharya, and Lord Gautama Buddha, whose religion has spread over the Far East, and the great galaxy of Rish and Rish of saints, so Rishis, of saints, of teachers, and the great ones took interest not only in the awakening man's spiritual natures, but also in all the affairs that made for their well-being on earth. All who belong to the Christian world now, or ought to know, much about the great successions of prophets and teachers and saints in their dispensations, and that in some way, perhaps not clearly understood, their supreme teacher, the Christ himself, was and is a man as well as God, and all the earlier religions, descendants as some of them may be amid the decay of nations, down even to those primitive tribes of men, show as outstanding features the existence of supermen, helpers in every way of a childlike people among whom they dwelt, and enumeration of these, or sorry, enumeration, enumeration, enumeration of these, interesting and valuable as it is, would take us too far aside from our present purpose. So I will refer to the reader for it too. So he's saying, if you want to look at this, there's a book by Mr. W. Williamson. It's an excellent book on the Great Law. So if you want to go into that. Recent evidence, there is much direct and recent evidence of the existence of these great ones. In many early days, I never needed any such evidence, because I was fully persuaded as a result of my studies that there must be such people. To believe that they were such glorified men seemed perfectly natural, and my only desire was to meet them face to face. Yet there are many among the newer members of the society who, reasonably enough, want to know what evidence there is. There is a considerable amount of personal testimony. Madame Blavatsky, Connell Olcott, and co-founder of the Theosophical Society. Dr. Anne Besant, Besant, our present president, and myself, all of us have seen some of the great ones, and many other members of the society have also been privileged to see one or two of them. And there is simple testimony in what all of these people have written. Hey, Dookie, Ducky. Yeah, everybody that's joining, good morning. Hope your day is good.
And I'm putting a summary of this book on the school.
Okay, Cindy said she's putting a summary of this book on the school. So if people want to look at that, hey, Shift Lab. So, Blavatsky and them, they traveled all over with this Theosophic group, and they created lots. Rudolf Steiner and all of them were a part of this. And that's why they called them the what was it again? I can't recall the name right now. And they brought in all this knowledge. It connected with all these teachers, and I think they were part of the Masters of the Far East and others. So it's really interesting how all these books sort of coincide with these, like Saint Germain and all kinds of other teachers. And you see these different things being verified from many different books. And you get knowledge and answers. Like, this should give us some really, really good understandings of things. So Dr. Annie Bassinet, our present president, and myself, all of us have seen some of the great ones, and many other members of this society have also been privileged to see one or two of them. There's ample testimony, and all of these people have written. It is sometimes object that those who saw them, or fancied that they did so, may have been dreaming or perhaps deluded. The chief reason, I think, for the possibility of such a suggestion is that we have very rarely seen the adepts at a time when both they and we were in the physical bodies. In the early days of the society, when only Madame Blavatsky had developed higher faculties, the masters not infrequently materialized themselves so that all could see them, and showed themselves thus physically on various occasions. You will find many records of such happenings in the early history of our society. But of course, the great ones, so showing himself, was not in his physical body, but in his materialized form. And this is where when you ascend, you take your body up and everything, and then when you descend, you come back in the same body. Yeah, the Brotherhood. So this one, Helen, is the Masters and the Path by Charles W. Leadbeater. And he's talking about Madame Blavatsky and Steiner and all these people were part of this time. And these spirits, higher beings like Saint Germain and them would materialize and reveal themselves. Like there's many things that they experienced. And they were given all this knowledge before the chaos came into the world where we're all spinning out and we're getting to the end of this time. And then we're going to shift into something bigger. Okay, if you got the book, then it's a good read. It'll give you lots of answers, may even connect you with higher beings, Helen. You have this book for a reason, and I'm reading it today. I'll read it over the next couple of days. I'll try to read the whole thing. And I'll talk here and there and share stuff along the way. It is sometimes, okay, they and we were in the physical bodies in the early days of the society when only Madame Blavatsky had developed higher faculties. The masters not infrequently materialized themselves so that all could see them, and showed themselves thus physically on various occasions. You will find many records of such happenings in the early history of our society, but of course the great ones the great one so showing himself was not in his physical body, but in his materialized form. Many of us habitually and constantly see them during our sleep. We go out in our astral bodies or in the mental body according to our development, and we visit them and see them in their physical bodies. But we are not at that time in ours. And it is why on the physical plane people tend to be skeptical about such experiences. So that's where when you astral travel, you go to these higher planes, you go to see these beings in these schools and that, and you learn how to leave your body and go there and come back. And that's what he's talking about here. And a lot of people want to astral travel, but they want to go in people's rooms and into their homes and spy on them. That's not what astral traveling is about. This is what it's really about. Okay, I read that. You will find many records. Okay, I got past that. Okay, the great one so showing himself was not in his physical body, but in the materialized one. Many of us habitually and constantly see them during our sleep. We go out of our astral body, so we all go into our spirit body and leave our bodies to go into the spirit plane in lots of places for 8 hours while we're sleeping. And this is a natural thing. But you can do it while you're awake. You can learn how to step out your body and go into the spirit realm. In natives, we call it journeying. In the 3D Western society, they call it astral traveling. So they leave their bodies according to our. Many of us habitually and constantly see them during our sleep. We go out of in our astral body or in our mental body according to our development. We visit them and see them in their physical bodies, but we are not at that time in ours. And that is why the physical plane tends to be skeptical about such experiences. Men object. But in these cases, either you who saw them were out of the physical body and may have been dreamed or deluded, or those who appeared to you came phenomenally and then disappeared again. So how do you know that they were what you suppose them to be? There are few cases in which both the adepts and the person who saw him were in the physical body. It happened with Madame Blavatsky. I have heard her testify that she lived for some time in a monastery in Nepal where she saw 3 of our masters constantly in their physical vehicles. Some of them have come down more than once from their mountain retreats in India in their physical bodies. Connell Olcott spoke of having seen two of them on those occasions. He had met Master Morya, Morya, and also Master Kuthumi, uh, Domdar K. Malavakar, whom I knew in 1884 had encounters with Master Kuthumi in his physical body. There was a case of S. Ramaswamy Iyer, Iyer, a gentleman who I knew well in those days, who had the experience of meeting the Master Morya physically and has written an account of that meeting, which I shall quote later. There was a case of Mr. W.T. Brown of the London Lodge, who also was privileged to meet with one of the great ones under similar conditions. There is also a vast amount of Indian testimony which has never been collected and sifted, mainly because those of whom these experiences came were so thoroughly persuaded of the existence of superhumans and of the possibility of meeting them that they did not regard any individual case as worthy of recording. And it's like when we go into night lodges and we're in some of the native ceremonies and these spirits materialize to us. And they do all kinds of things, like when Cindy first went into the Uipi, and while she was in there, the spirits came over and started touching her. We had a friend who was a counselor and that came with us, and she stood and she pushed herself into a corner like this. She pushed her back right in so nobody could go behind her in the dark, because she didn't want anybody behind her in the dark she didn't trust. And she says, when the ceremony, she's like, how? And I asked her, how what? She said, well, there was all kinds of hands and that touching me behind. There was people behind me. But I knew I was pushed right up against the wall, and that wall's solid, yet they were doing all this stuff. There was eagles, wings, and everything slapping my back, but I was pressed so tight into that corner, nothing can get behind me. And this is where these things are real. But a lot of people are skeptics. They never want to believe this. They're always trying to disprove everything. Yeah, I think I read The Life of Pi years ago when it came out. I've read so many books over the years. It's like lots of different books. So, I was right here. Okay, personal experience. So he's gonna share his personal experience. I myself can report two occasions on which I have met a master, both of us being in the physical vehicle. One of them was an adept to whom the name of Jupiter was assigned in the book of the lives of the Alcyone, Alcyone, Alcyone,
yeah.
the lives of Alcyone. So there's a book there called The Lives of Alcyone, and there's a person in there, his name is Jupiter, who greatly assisted in the writing of portions of Madame Blavatsky's famous work, Isis Unveiled. And I have Isis Unveiled, or two really, really thick books. When that was being done in Philadelphia and New York, when I was living at Adry, or Adyar, he was so kind as to request my revered teacher, Swami T. Sabaro, to bring me to call upon him. Obeying his summons, we journeyed to his house and were most graciously received by him. After a long conversation of deep interest, we have the honor of dining with him, Brahma though he be, and spent the night and a part of the next day under his roof. In that case, it will be admitted that there could be no questions of illusion. The other adept whom I have the privilege of encountering physically was the Master, the Comte de Saint Germain, called sometimes Prince Rakoczy, Rakoczy. I met him under quite ordinary circumstances, without any previous appointments, and as though by chance, walking down the Corso in Rome, dressed just as an Italian gentleman might. He took me up into the garden of the Pincian Hills, Pincian Hill. We sat for more than an hour talking about the society and its work, or perhaps I should rather say that he spoke and I listened. Although when he asked questions, I answered. Other members of the Brotherhood I have seen under various circumstances. First encounters with one of them was at a hotel in Cairo. I was on my way out to India with Madame Blavatsky and some others, and we stayed in the city for some time. We all used to gather in Madame Blavatsky's room for work, and I was sitting on the floor cutting out and arranging for her a quality of newspaper articles which she wanted. She sat at the table close by, indeed. My left arm was actually touching her dress. The door of the room was in full sight, and it certainly did not open. But quite suddenly, without any preparation, there was a man standing almost between me and Madame Blavatsky, within touch of both of us. It gave me a great start, and I jumped up in some confusion. Madame Blavatsky was much amused and said, "If you do not know enough not to be startled at such a trifle as that, you will not get far in this occult work." I was introduced to the visitor, who was not then yet an adept, but an arhat, Arhat, which is one grade below that state. He has since become the Master Djwal, capital Djwal, capital Kul. For some months after the Master Moira came to us one day, looking exactly as though in the physical body, walked through the room where I was in order to communicate with Madame Blavatsky, who was in her bedroom inside. That was the first time I had seen him plainly and clearly, for I had not then developed my latent senses sufficiently to remember what I saw in the subtle body. I saw the Master Kuthumi under similar conditions on the roof of our headquarters, and Adar, he was stepping over balustrade, Blustrade, as though he had just materialized from the empty air on the other side of it. I have also many times seen the Master Djwal call on the roof in the same way. This would, I suppose, be considered less certain evidence, since the adepts come as apparitions do. But as I have since learned to use my higher vehicle freely and to visit with these great ones in that way, I can testify that those in the early years of the society came and materialized for us are the same men whom I have often seen living in their own homes. People have suggested that I and others who have the same experience may be but dreaming, since these visits take place during the sleep of the body. I can only reply that it is a remarkably consistent dream, extending in my own case over 40 years. It has been dreamt simultaneously by a large number of people. Those who wish to collect evidence about these matters, and it is quite reasonable that they should wish to do so, should turn to the early literature of our society. If they meet our president, they can hear from her how many of the great ones she has seen on different occasions. And there are many of our members who will bear witness without hesitation that they have seen a master. It may be that in meditation they have seen his face, and later have had definite proof that he is the real being. Much evidence may be found in carnal occults, old old diary leaves, and there is an interesting treatise called Do the Brothers Exist, written by M.A.O. Hum, or Hume, Hume, a man who stood high in the civil service in India and worked much with the late President Mr. A.P. Sinnett. It was published in a book entitled Hints on the Esoteric Theosophy. Mr. Hum, who was a skeptical Anglo-Indian with the legal mind, went into the question of the existence of the brothers, as the masters are also called, because they belong to the great brotherhood, also because they are the elder brothers of humanity, and even at the early date decided that he had overwhelming testimony that they did exist, and very much more evidence has accumulated since the book was published. The possession of extended visions and other faculties resulting from the unfolding of our latent powers have also brought within our constant experience the fact that there are other orders of being than the human, some of whom rank alongside the adepts in a grade of existence higher than our own. We met with some whom we call divas or angels, and with others whom we see to be far beyond ourselves in every respect. Natives understood this. Natives were really connected into all of this, but because of Christianity, we really disconnected from this. And like I say, natives had had a lot of experiences. They had a lot of people who really, really connected with this higher truth. So I'm going to read this one, The Evolution of Life, and then when I'm done that, Cindy can come in. Maybe I might read a little more than that. I thought it might go on a bit, but we'll see how much I read before a break. So the evolution of life. Since in the course of our development we have become able to communicate with the adepts, we have naturally asked them with all reverence how they have attained that level. They tell us with one accord that not long ago they stood where we stand now. They have risen out of the ranks of ordinary humanity, and they have told us that we in time too shall be as they are now, and that the whole system is a graded evolution of life extending up and up and up further than we can follow it, even unto the Godhead itself. We find that as there is definite stages in the early evolution, the vegetable above the mineral, the animal above the vegetable, the human above the animal. So in the same way, the human kingdom has a definite end, a boundary at which it passes into the kingdom distinctly higher than itself, than beyond men that are the supreme men or supermen. In the study of this system of evolution, we have learnt that there are in every man three great divisions: body, soul, and spirit. And that's where it's like mind, body, and soul. There's all kinds of ways of saying this. Each of these is capable of further subdivisions. That is the definition which gives by St. Paul 2,000 years ago. The spirit or monad of the breath of God, for the word spirit means breath, and the Latin spiro. The divine spark, which is truly the man, though it may more accurately be described as hovering over man as we know him. The scheme of its evolution is that it should descend into matter, and through its descent obtain definiteness and accuracy in material detail. So far we are able to see this monad, which is a spark of the divine fire, cannot descend as far as our present level, cannot directly reach its physical plane in which we are now thinking and working, probably because the rates of its vibration and those of physical matter differ too widely, so that there must be intermediate states of conditioning. On what plane of nature that divine spark originally exists, we do not know, for it is far above out of our reach. The lowest manifestation of it, which might be called the reflection of its descents into the lowermost of the cosmic plane, as described in the textbook of Theosophy. We speak commonly of the seven planes of existence, which are subdivisions or subplanes of the lowest cosmic plane, called in our book the Prakritic, Prakritic, meaning the physical plane of cosmos. The monad can descend to the second of these subplanes, which we consequently call the monadic plane, but it does not seem able to penetrate lower than this in order to obtain the necessary contact with still denser matter. It put down part of itself through two whole planes, and that fragment is what we call the ego or soul, and that's like the 8th, ninth, 10th chakra. And this higher energy, which is your oversoul, is what they're trying to talk about. And it's come down, and it can't quite come down in us because we're in the third dimension. Once we go through the fourth into the fifth, then we take on all of these God qualities. We take on this higher ancient truth, then we're able to live for millions of years and things. Natives understood this. They had ceremonies and they had all kinds of things where they interacted with beings, and they knew of the star brothers and sisters, and they accepted the higher echelons and everything like that. The divine spirit far above us merely hovers over us. The soul, which is a small and practical representative of it. It is as though the monad puts down a finger of fire, and at the end of that finger is the soul, cannot descend below that higher part of the mental plane, which is the fifth plane counting downwards, the physical being of the seventh and lowest. And in order that it may reach a still lower level, it must in turn put down small portions of itself, and that's that light that's inside our bodies. A small portion of itself, which become the personality that we know. So this personality, what each person commonly thinks of to be himself, is in truth but a fragment of a fragment. All the evolution through the lower kingdoms is preparatory to the development of this human constitution. An animal during its life on the physical plane and for some time after that in the astral plane has a soul just as individually and separate as a man, but when the animal comes to the end of its astral life, that soul does not reincarnate again in a single body, but returns to the kind of reservoir of soul matter, called in our book a group soul. It is as though the group souls were in buckets of water, supplying the needs of several animals of the same kind. Say, for example, 20 horses. When a horse is to be born from the group soul, it is as though one dipped a vessel into the bucket and brought it out full of water. During the life of that horse, all kinds of experiences come to him which modify his soul, from which it learns lessons, and they may be compared to various kinds of colorings matter casts into the vessel of the water. When the horse dies, the water in the vessel is emptied back into the bucket, and the coloring matter which has acquired spreads all through the whole bucket, so everybody sort of shares in its experience, is filled from that bucket. It will be obvious that it is impossible to take out it exactly the same drops of water which constitute the soul of previous horses. And then it says, number 1, for further details on this process, see a textbook of Theosophy. When an animal has developed far enough to become human, that means that at the end of its life, his soul is not poured back again into the group soul, but remains as a separate entity. And now a very curious but very beautiful fate befalls him. The soul matter, the water in the vessel, becomes itself a vehicle for something much higher. Instead of acting as a soul, it is itself ensouled. We have now exact analogy on the physical plane. unless we think of pumping air into water under high pressure and thereby making it aerated water. If we accept the symbolism, the water which was previously the animal soul has now become the causal body of a man. The air pumped into it is the ego of which I have spoken. The soul of man, which is but a partial manifestation of the divine spirit, this descent of the ego is symbolized in the ancient mythology of the Greek idea of uh, the Carter, Krater, or cup, and by the medieval story of the Holy Grail, for the Grail or the cup is the perfected result of all evolution, in which is poured the wine or the divine life, so that the soul of man may be born. And our bodies are those vessels, basically a cup. Natives, we say a hollow bone, so whatever comes inside it. And the soul is what activates the body, right? So we have said that this, which has previously been the animal soul, becomes in the case of man what is called the causal body. This exists in the higher part of the mental plane as a permanent vehicle occupied by the ego or the human soul, and all that has been learnt in its evolution is transferred to the new center of life. The evolution of the soul consists of the gradual return to higher and higher levels on the plane next below to the monadic, carrying with it the result of its descent in the shape of experiences gained and acquired. So we carry all our memories of every lifetime and things as we evolve. I'm glad you're here, Attempt 1. The physical body in all of us is fully developed, and because it is so, we are supposed to have conquered it. But it should be fully under the control of the soul. Among the higher races of mankind at the present day, it usually is so, though it may break away and run wild for a little at times. The astral body is also fully developed, but is not yet by any means under perfect control, even among the races to which we belong. There are many people who are the victims of their own emotions, and that's why we can't be emotional garbage dumps, because we're victims of it. Instead of being able to govern them perfectly, they too often allow themselves to be governed by them, by their emotions. They let their emotions run away with them, just as a wild horse may run away with the rider, to take him into many places whereto he does not wish to go. We may take it then that in all the best men of the more advanced races at the present day, the physical body is fully developed and fairly under control. The astral body is also fully developed, but not by any means under perfect control. The mental body is in the process of unfoldment, but its growth is yet very far from complete. We have a long ways to go yet before these three bodies, the physical, the astral, and mental, are entirely subordinate to the soul. When that happens, the lower self will have been absorbed into the higher self, and the ego, the soul, will have dominated the man. Though the man is not yet perfect, the different vehicles are so far harmonized that they have but one aim. Up to this time, the soul has been slowly controlling the personal vehicle until they become one with it. But now the monad, in its turn, begins to dominate the soul, and there will presently come a time when, just as the personality, the soul have become one. The spirit and the soul will become one in their turn. It is the unification of the ego of the monad, and when that is achieved, the man has attained the object of his descent into matter. He has become the superman or the adept, and that's when the energy comes in. But you got to surrender to it, and everybody is scared of that. This book is called The Masters and the Path by Charles W. Leadbeater. And then I'm going to read Superhuman Life, and then I'm going to break. Superhuman Life. Now only for the first time does he enter upon his real life, for the whole of his stupendous process of evolution, through all the lower kingdoms, and then through the human kingdom up to the attainment of adeptship, is but a preparation for the true life of spirit, which begins only when man becomes more and more than the man. Humanity is the final class for the world school, and when man has been trained therein, he passes out into the real life, the life of the glorified spirit, the life of the Christ. So you become this light, which they call the Christ, which is your soul, and it becomes everything. That's when you become God, superhuman, but you have to truly surrender it. You can't order it around. You try to do that, you're just going to end up in doing reincarnation, recycling over and over and over until you realize. And everybody is trying to control it, thinking they're powerful instead of surrendering and let it teach them and grow with it. Humanity is the final class of the world school, and when man has been trained therein, he passes out into the real life and the life, the glorified spirit, the life of the Christ. What this is, we know but little as yet, though we see some of those who are sharing it. It has the glory and the splendor which is beyond all comparison, beyond our comprehension, and yet it is a vivid and living fact. And the attainment of it by every one of us is an absolute certainty from which we cannot escape, even if we would. If we act selfishly, if we set ourselves against the current of evolution, we can delay our progress, but we cannot finally prevent it. Having finished with human life, the perfected man usually drops his various material bodies, but he retains the power to take up any of them if he should need them in the course of his work. So he can just materialize his body. He come here, show himself, and then disappear. He can do that very easily. That's what these masters do. That's why they call them ascended masters. They come and go. In the majority of cases, one who gains that level no longer needs a physical body. He no longer retains an astral or a mental or even a causal body, but lives permanently at his highest level. Whenever, for any purpose, he needs to deal with the lower plane, he must take a temporary vehicle belonging to that plane. And that's where he's got to materialize something to come into the plane. Because only through the medium of its matter can he come into contact with those who live therein. If he wishes to talk to men physically, he must take a physical body. He must have at least a partial materialization, or he cannot speak. In the same way, if he wishes to impress our minds, he must draw around himself a mental body whenever he needs in his work to take a lower vehicle. He has the power to do so, but he holds it only temporarily. There are 7 lines of still further progress along which the perfected man can go, a list of which we shall give in later chapters. And that's where yesterday I was trying to show these 7 bodies, 7 causal bodies. And this is your auric, and then it explains this. And that's why I tell people, buy Barbara Brennan's books. Take the time to read them. Look at the pictures. Don't download it onto the computer because you won't have the pictures. You have to actually buy the books. They're really important. So yeah, again, back to this book and the Theosophy Society. Madame Blavatsky and them, they searched the world for answers, and they were meant to bring this all in. That's where a lot of this stuff we are now working on, lots of us have moved past that. And this knowledge was given to us before, so when the chaos came, it's already here. It's just trying to find it. It's like a lot of people when they find out about the Palladians. Well, in the 90s, a lot of people were channeling stuff from the Palladians. A lot of people found out about beings from Orion, and they were channeling. There was a lot of channeling books starting to come out. About the 60s all the way up to 2000. And so this book, like I say, it's giving a bit of an idea of different things, and this was given to them by these masters, Saint Germain and Kuthumi and others, and they brought these teachings in, and they're still trying to teach us. That's what Telos was about. That's what the seven flames are about. And these are things I'm trying to give you, trying to find ways so you can find what evidence you need to work with. So, superhuman life, not only for the first time does he enter upon his real life, for whole of this stupendous process of evolution through all the lower kingdoms and even through the human kingdom up to the attainment of adeptship, is but a preparation for the true life of the spirit, which begins only when man becomes more than man. Humanity is the final class of the world's school, and when man has been trained therein, he passes out into the real life, the life of the glorified spirit, the life of the Christ. What this is, we know but little as yet. Though we see some of those who are sharing it, it has the glory and the splendor which is beyond all comparison, beyond our comprehension, and yet it is a vivid and living fact, and the attainment of it by every one of us is an absolute certainty certainty from which we cannot escape, even if it would be. If we act selfishly, if we set ourselves against the current of evolution, we can delay our progress, but we cannot finally prevent it. Having finished with the human life, the perfected man usually drops his various material bodies, but he retains the power to take up any of them if ever he should need them in the course of his work. In the opportunity of cases, one who gains that level no longer needs a physical body. He no longer retains an astral, mental, and causal body, but lives permanently in his highest level. Whenever, for any purpose, he needs to deal with the lower plane, he must take a temporary vehicle belonging to that plane, because only through the medium of its matter can he come into contact with those who live therein. If he wishes to talk to men physically, he must take a physical body. He must have at least a partial materialization, or he cannot speak. In some way, if he wishes to impress our minds, he must draw around himself a mental body. Whatever he needs in his work to take a lower vehicle, he has the power to do so, but he holds it only temporarily. There are 7 lines of still further progress along which the perfected man can go, a list of which we shall give in later chapters. The Brotherhood of Adepts. The world is guided and directed by a large extent of the Brotherhood of Adepts, to which our masters belong. Theosophical students make all sorts of mistakes about them. They often regard them as great monastic community, all living together in some secret place. They suppose them sometimes to be angels, and many of our students have thought that they were all Indian, or that they all resided in the Himalayas. None of these hypotheses is true. There is a great brotherhood, and its members are in constant communication with one another. But their communication is on higher planes, and they do not necessarily live together. As part of their work, some of these great brothers, whom we call masters of the wisdom, are willing to take pupil apprentices and teach them, but they form only a small section of the mighty body of the perfected man. As will be explained later on, there are 7 types of men, for every one belongs to one of the 7 rays, into which the great wave of evolving life is distinctly divided. It would seem that one adept on each of the rays is appointed to attend to training the beginners, or training of beginners, and all those who are coming along his particular ray of evolution passes through his hands. No one below the rank of adept is permitted to assume full responsibility for a novice, though those who have been chelas for a number of years are often employed as deputies. and receive the privilege of helping and advising promising young aspirants. These older pupils are gradually being trained for the further work, then they in turn shall become adepts. They are learning to take more and more and more of the routine work off the hands of their masters, so that the latter may be set free for higher labors which only they can undertake. The, the primary selection of candidates for discipleship is now left to a large extent in the hands of these older workers, and the candidates are temporarily linked with such representatives rather than directly with the great adepts. But the pupils and the masters are so wonderfully one that perhaps this is almost a distinction without a difference. And that's where you ask to go to these schools, that's where you ask to go to these places to get all this knowledge and things. It's really important. The powers of the adept. The powers of the adept are indeed many and wonderful, and they all follow in natural sequence from the faculties which we ourselves possess. It is only that they have these faculties in a very much greater degree. I think that the outstanding characteristic of the adept, as compared to ourselves, is that he looks upon everything from an absolute different point of view, for there is in him nothing whatever of the thought of self which is so prominent in the majority of men. The adept has eliminated the lower self and is living not for self but for all, and yet in any way that only he can really understand. That all is truly himself also. He has reached the stage in which there is no flaw in his character, nothing of a thought or feeling for a personal separated self. His only motive is that of helping forward evolution, of working in harmony with the logos who direct it. Perhaps the next most prominent characteristic is his all-around development. We are all of us imperfect. None has attained the highest level in any line, and even the great scientist and the great saint has usually reached higher excellence in one thing only, and there remain other sides of his nature not yet unfolded. All of us possess some germ of all the different characteristics, but always they are but partial awakenings, and one much more than another. An adept, however, is an all-around man, a man whose devotion and love and sympathy and compassion are perfect, while at the same time his intellect is something far grander than we can as yet realize, and his spirituality is wonderful and divine. He stands out above and beyond all men whom we know, because of the fact that he is fully developed. So, Chapter 2, the physical body of the masters. There has been among theosophical students a great deal of vagueness and uncertainty about the masters, so perhaps it may help us to realize how natural their lives are, and how there is an ordinary physical side to them. If I say a few words about the daily life and appearance of some of them, there is no one physical characteristic by which an adept can be infallibly distinguished from another man. But he always appears impressive, noble, dignified, holy, and serene, and anyone meeting him could barely fail to recognize that he was in the presence of a remarkable man. He is the strong but silent man, speaking only when he has a definite object in view, to encourage, to help, or to warn. Yet he is wonderfully benevolent, full of a keen sense of humor always of a kindly order, used never to wound, but always to enlighten the troubles of life. The Master Moria once said that it is possible to make progress on the occult path without a sense of humor. And yet, like I say, the angels and the universal beings and that, they're really funny. When they give you a joke and that, sometimes you'll hear them all laughing, and it's really hilarious. Sometimes they will do that with me. The Master Moya once said that it is impossible to make progress on the occult path without a sense of humor, and certainly all the adepts whom I have seen have possessed that qualification. Most of them are definitely fine looking men. Their physical bodies are partially perfect, for they live in complete obedience to the law of health, and above all, they never worry about anything. All their evil karma has long been exhausted, and thus the physical body is as perfect an expression of the, I don't know how to say this word, agioid, Augoeides, or glorified body, of the ego as a limitation of the physical plane will allow, so that not only is the present body of the adept usually splendidly handsome, but also a new body that he may take in the subsequent incarnation is likely to be an almost exact reproduction of the old one, allowing for racial and likely to be at most, jumped wrong, allowing for racial and family differences because there is nothing to modify it. His freedom from karma gives them, when for any reason they choose to take a new body, entirely liberated to select a birth in any country or race that may be convenient for the work that they have to do. And thus the nationality of the particular body which they happen to be wearing at any given time is not of primary importance. That's why it's not about the body and the language and the ancestors and that. It's about something way bigger. And in the age of Aquarius, we're going to remove all of that. Once we go into the fourth, fifth dimension, we're going to get rid of all kinds of silliness. Now that a certain man is an adept, it would be necessary to see his causal body, for in that his development would show by its greatly increased size and by the special arrangement of its colors into concrete spheres, such as indicated to some extent in the illustration of causal body of the heart plate, in man visible and invisible. Next one, a ravine in Tibet. There is a certain valley, or rather ravine in Tibet, where three of these great ones, the Master Mora, Kuthumi, and Dajwal Kal, are living at the present time. And then there's a bit of a pencil drawing of the ravine. It's really hard to see, but it's there. The Master Dajwal Kal and Madame Blavatsky request, once made for her participation, she'd, I guess, draw a picture of the mouth of the ravine, and the illustration given therein is a reproduction of the photograph of that. The original, which is on silk, is preserved in a shrine room at the headquarters of the Theosophical Society, and Adyar, Adyar, on the left of the picture of Master Moira is seen on a horse back near the door of his house. The dwelling of the Master Kuthumi does not appear in the picture, being higher up the valley. Around the bend on the right, Madame Blavatsky begged the Master Dajwal Kal to put himself in the picture. He at first refused, but eventually added himself as a small figure standing in the water and grasping a pole, but with his back to the spectator. This original is faintly tainted, and the colors being blue, green, and black. It bears the signature of the artist nicknamed Guy Benjamin, which he bore in his youth, in his early days of the society, long before he reached adeptship. The signature was upon the lower margins outside the actual picture, and consequently it does not appear in our reproduction. Just checking the time here. May be empowered. A.C. Tibbets. And again, reading the Master Zen, The Path. The scene is evidently taken early in the day, as the morning mists are still clinging to the hillsides. Master Moira, Kuthumi occupy a house on the opposite sides of the narrow ravine, the slopes of which are covered with pine trees. Paths run down the ravine past their house to meet at the bottom where there is little bridge. Close to the bridge, a narrow door which may be seen on the left side at the bottom of the picture leads to a system of vast subterranean halls containing an occult museum which the Master Kuthumi and the Guardians on behalf of the Great White Brotherhood. The contents of this museum are the most varied character. They appear to be intended as a kind of illustration for the whole process of evolution. For example, there are here the most lifelike images of every type of man which has existed on this planet from the commencement, from gigantic, loose-jointed Lemurians to pygmies remain of even earlier and less human races. Models of Alto, Ravello show all the variations of the surface of the earth, the conditions before and after the great cataclysms which have changed it so much. Huge diagrams illustrate the migrations of different races of the world and show exactly how far they spread from their respective sources. Other similar diagrams are devoted to the influence of the various religions of the world, showing where each was practiced in its original purity and where it became mingled with the distorted by the remains of other religions. Amazingly lifelike statues perpetuate the physical appearance of certain of the great leaders and teachers of long forgotten races, and various objects of interest connect with important and even unnoticed advancements in civilization are preserved for the examination of posterity. Original manuscripts and incredible antiquity of priceless values are here to be seen. A manuscript, for example, written by the hand of Lord Buddha himself in his final life as Prince Siddhartha, and another written by Lord Christ during his birth in Palestine. Here is kept the marvelous original of the Book of the Dzyan, Dzyan, which Madame Blavatsky describes in the opening of the Secret Doctrines. Here too are secret scripts from other worlds than ours. Animals and vegetable forms are also depicted, some few of which are known to us as fossils, though most of them are unimaginable by our modern science. Actual models of some of the great cities of remote and forgotten antiquity are here for the study of the pupils. All statues and models are vivid colored exactly as were the originals, and we may note that the collection here was intentionally put together at the time in order to represent the posterity and exact stages through which the evolution, our civilization of the time was passing, so that instead of mere incomplete fragments such as our museums so often present to us, we have in all cases, an intentionally educational series of presentations. There we find models of all kinds of machinery which in different civilizations have evolved. And also, there are elaborate and abundant illustrations of the types of magic in use at the various periods of history. In the vestiges leading to these vast halls are kept the living image of those pupils of the Master Moray and Kuthumi who happen at the time to be on probation, which I will describe later. These images are ranged around the wall like statues and are perfect representations of the pupils concerned. It is not probable, however, that they are visible to the physical eye, for the lowest matter enters into their composition is etheric. Near the bridge there is also a small temple with turrets of somewhat Burmese forms, to which a few villages go to make the offerings of fruit and flowers and to burn comfrey and recite the Pancha Sila. A rough and uneven track leads down to the valley by the side of the stream. From either of the two houses of the masters and other houses can be seen. They are both above the bridge, but both cannot be seen from it, since the ravine bends around. If we follow the path up the valley past the house of Master Kuthumi, it will lead us to a large pillar of rock beyond which, the ravine bending around again, it passes out of sight. Some distance further on, the ravine opens out into a plateau on which there is a lake, in which traditions tell us Madame Blavatsky used to bathe, and it is said that she found it very cold. The valley is sheltered and faces south, and though the surrounding country is under snow during the winter, I do not remember having seen any near the master's houses. These houses are of stone, very heavy and strongly built. And then it shows a little diagram of Kuthumi's house inside. No, glad you can join us for a little bit there, Marinda. I'm going to be cutting off here soon because I have work to do. And then I'll come back tomorrow and carry on reading. And I'm reading The Master and the Path by Charles W. Leadbeater. The house of Master Kuthumi is divided into two parts by a passageway running straight through it, as will be seen from our diagram, which shows the ground plan in the southern half of the house. On entering the passage, the front door on the right leads to a principal room of the house, in which our master usually sits. It is large and lofty, about 50 feet by 30 feet, in many ways more like a hall than a room, and it occupies the whole of the front of the house on that side of the passage. Behind that large room are two others nearly square rooms, one of which he uses as a library and the other as a bedroom. That completes that side or division of the house, which is apparently reserved for the master's personal use and is surrounded by a broad veranda. The other side of the house, on the left, the passage as one enters, seems to be divided into smaller rooms and offices of various kinds. We have had an opportunity to closely examine them, but we have noted that just across the passage from the bathroom is a well-appointed across the bedroom, is a well-appointed bathroom. The large room is well supplied with windows both along the front and the end, so well that on entering one gets the impression of an almost continuous outlook. Under the window runs a long seat. There is also a somewhat unusual feature for that country, a large open fireplace in the middle of the wall opposite the front window. This is so arranged as to heat all three rooms, and it is a curious hammered iron cover, which I am told is unique in Tibet. Over the opening of the fireplace is a mantelpiece, and nearby stands the master's armchair, a very old carved wood, hollowed to fit the sitter, so that there is no cushions are required. Dotted about the room are tables and settees, sofas, and mostly without backs, and in one corner is a keyboard of the master's organ. The ceiling is perhaps 20 feet high and is very handsome with its fine carved beams, which descend into the ornamental points, where they meet one another and divide the ceiling into two oblong selections. An arched opening with pillars in the center, somewhat of a Gothic style, but without glass, open into the study, and the similar windows opened into the bedroom. This latter room is very simply furnished. There is an ordinary bed, a swing hammock like between two carved wooden supports fixed in the wall. One of these carved to imitate a lion's head, the other is an elephant, and the bed, when not in use, folds up against the wall. The library is a fine room containing thousands of volumes running out from the wall. There are tall bookshelves filled with books in many languages, a number of them being modern European works. At the top, there are open shelves of manuscripts. The master is a great linguistic, and besides being a fine English scholar, has a thorough knowledge of French and German. The library also contains a typewriter, which was presented to the master by one of his pupils. Of the master's family I know but little. There is a lady, evidently a pupil, whom he calls sister. Whether she is actually his sister or not, I do not know. She might possibly be a cousin or a niece. She looks much older than he, but that would not make their relationship improbable, as he has appeared of about the same age for a long time. She resembles him to a certain extent, and once or twice when there have been gatherings she has come and joined the party, though her principal work seems to be to look after the housekeeping and manage the servants. Among the latter are an old man and his wife, who have been for a long time in the master's service. They do not know anything of the real dignity of their employer, but regard him as a very diligent and gracious patron, and naturally they benefit greatly by being in his service. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop there. The next one will be the master's activities, and then other houses. Then it's going to be the first ray of adepts, then the second ray, other rays, and then the perfect physical vehicle, borrowed vehicles, and then we'll go into part 3, the pupils chapter, entrance to the path. So this is where it's going to start trying to share different things. So hopefully this book is going to help you. It's going to give you different ways of thinking and looking, and really calling on these teachers and these guides, really going to these places for healing and other things. Use your sleep time, your dream time, to go to the places to access things.